Good afternoon. This is Jody Sleeper Triplet of JST Coaching and Training. Welcome to our webinar for a very cold here in Virginia, cold Thursday afternoon. And for those of you who can't join us live, hope you're enjoying listening to this recording later at your leisure. Today, we're going to be talking about helping students to fly, the social impact of executive functioning problems. In all the time that I have been working with students for the last 20 years or so, many times parents bring their students to coaching for the academic piece. One of the pieces that we end up working on sort of around the bend is the social piece, the issues that do come up when students have executive functioning problems. So think about that, whether you're a coach, a parent, a professional referring out to coaching, that we can definitely look at that social impact and help your students to become more aware of what's happening to them as far as their self-awareness around executive functioning, as well as take advantage of the coach's knowledge to be able to assist. So to start out with, for executive functioning, for those of you who are not familiar with it, I wanted to show you this picture. And there are handouts, by the way, that are posted in the webinar if you'd like those, or you can always email me for a copy. The delayed development of executive functions in that prefrontal cortex of the brain, the last part to develop are where the executive skills are. And in that section, we have our planning, our organization, a bit of our personality, the skills to be able to self-regulate emotions, behavior, and oftentimes the emotional piece, that immaturity that you might notice, that comes from underdeveloped executive functioning skills. And that doesn't mean that those skills won't improve over time. It just takes longer than most of us might realize. Studies that I've been looking at that go back to 2001 and then most recently in 2006 really indicate that when they look at brains using MRIs and in interviews and talking with students as well, that executive functioning skills are not fully developed in many young people, especially if they have executive functioning deficits, ADHD, learning issues, or other conditions that might be impacted. Those don't fully develop until about age 25 or 30. When I first heard that, it's like, wow, that makes a lot of sense considering the number of students that I've coached over the years and how I've watched their maturity really kick into gear after we've coached a while and they're learning and really honing in on those executive functioning skills. That can happen at high school level, definitely at college, and for some students just taking that gap year, a delay between high school and college, learning some skills, developing their social skills, that can make a difference as well. So the areas of focus, we have four specific areas that I would say are directly related to the executive functioning issues and the social impact. One is resiliency. The second one is self-regulation, being able again to regulate emotions, decisions. It has to do with impulsivity, getting upset, and not being able to manage emotions, self-awareness, and self-confidence. And I'm going to go through each one of these with you in hopes that I can help you get a little more information as to how to work with your students to improve that, help them improve in these areas, in addition to learning yourself how these deficits really make a difference in the way that oftentimes students perform. And that's because this is linked not only to the social piece, but it affects everything. if your child, your student, isn't able to manage in these 4 areas, it's very hard to make friends, to be happy, to feel confident, to be ready to get up and go out for the day, stand up in front of a class and give a presentation, whatever it is that they need to do. When we build on these 4 skill sets, it can really help a lot. So the first one is resiliency. And very simply, according to the dictionary, resiliency is the ability to recover quickly from setbacks, to be able to bounce back, to get a second wind, a belief in oneself that, okay, that didn't go very well, but it'll be better the next time. I didn't make the team. I didn't get to go to the party. I didn't get that grade, but not that I can't do it, because they can do it. It's just how do we help students feel better about the fact that they are struggling in this area of resilience. For anyone who's looking for information on resilience specifics, on the JST Coaching YouTube page, there are a couple of videos on resiliency by Sam Goldstein, and also both Sam Goldstein, I'm going to type this in the chat area, Sam Goldstein and Robert Brooks wrote these great books on resilience, and they've done presentations over the years, and you might want to take a look at those. And one of the things that we know is that in terms of resilience, sometimes it's what younger children notice. Maybe they're seeing that their parents are not resilient, that something happens and their parents don't know how to quickly recover from that setback. Let's just imagine there's a car accident or an illness, and there are 2 ways to look at it. One is to be in that growth mindset of, okay, we can do it, we can change it, we're going to do the best we can given the situation, versus, oh my gosh, there's nothing that can be done, this is really bad, and sort of retreating from the rest of the world. Now, very simply for kids, this could be that in building their resiliency, they are less likely to have a tantrum at a younger age, to get upset, disappointed, feel depressed or stressed out when something happens, and learn how to jump back and see what's happening as an opportunity to look for new ways and new ideas with the help of the coach, parents, teachers, even with friends. So on the social side, imagine that there is a student who is in middle school, and this middle schooler didn't get picked for the play. This is a student who really loves drama and acting, but just wasn't quite at the level that was required in order to make the grade. So what ended up happening with this student is that there was an opportunity to be on the crew, backstage, still be involved in the play. And when that opportunity came up, this student had to make a choice. Do I walk away from it and say, no, if I can't be part of this as an actor on the stage, I'm going to go away? Or to make that decision, well, this is an opportunity. It's not what I wanted. It's not what I expected or hoped for, but it's an opportunity. Oftentimes, having coaching conversations can help with that, and finding new ways to present opportunities to students in a way that they might not have heard before. What I mean by that is, rather than saying, oh, too bad that you didn't get that part in the play, to say, well, how else could you enjoy theater? What other opportunities might there be? What's coming up next? Would you like to start preparing for that audition? Anything that will take it from the moment of, oh my gosh, this is horrible, into bouncing back. And we can start when our kids are young. It's also possible to do it later on. And again, as I said earlier, when we're continuing to watch the brain mature, it makes it easier for young people to be more resilient and bounce back. So, excuse me. So what do students with ADHD and executive functioning need to become more resilient? Well, as I was just saying, it's really about helping them to see that glass half full, to be able to have a way to to try something new and different and not to be afraid. It's hard to be resilient when there's fear that failure is going to be the outcome. So looking at the lesson learned rather than you failed, or oh my gosh, you got a D on that test, or you didn't get picked for the softball team, you didn't get asked out on that date. Well, what other things can be done? Consider the bigger picture, consider other alternatives, and helping young students to be able to manage even when they don't believe that they can do it. We know that they can, but they don't always believe us. And oftentimes having a coach on the outside who's not the parent makes a big difference in terms of the resiliency. The next piece is self-regulation. This is huge. Russell Barkley has another, I'm going to type this in as well. Excuse me. Russell Barkley has a great video, actually a series of videos on self-regulation and how important self-regulation is to one's ability to be successful and to be emotionally well. So again, the research shows that self-regulation skills are necessary to have reliable emotional well-being so that we're not looking at a roller coaster of emotions. Behaviorally, self-regulation is the ability to act in your long-term best interest consistent with your deepest values. So for example, if a teenager or even a young adult knows that it would not be in his or her best interest to cheat on a test or to lie to parents or to a friend, that it's really not a good thing to do, and internally they just don't feel like that would be the right thing to do. When we have self-regulation skills, it's possible to stop and think before you act, rather than the typical impulsivity and acting before thinking. So it really is shifting that behavior, and that's what we work on together, is what is it that's really important to you? How would acting in a negative or not an inappropriate way, how would that get in the way of your goals, your values, what's best for you? If you really like being in a certain school and spending time with your friends, what would it be like to stop and think before you shout something out in class or hit someone or throw something? Those are issues around self-regulation that take practice, because with self-awareness, it makes it easier for students to become self-regulated, but it's repetitive, and that's why I really, from a behaviorist standpoint, we look at repeating the positive behavior over and over again. So a mantra or a bit of self-talk for a student who's working on self-regulation might be, is this the best for me? Or how will this help me? How will this hurt me? And possibly look at different ways to have self-regulation continue to set in. And emotionally, being able to calm down, that is such a tough thing for kids to do in general, but when you're upset about something and things just don't seem to be going well, their self-soothing is a term that's used. When we learn as human beings how to soothe ourselves, it's like babies eventually learn to soothe themselves and go back to sleep when they're crying in the crib, as long as mom or dad isn't in there every 2 minutes pulling the baby out and holding the baby. And for new parents, it's really difficult because they're always there wanting to calm their child down. And I get it. I remember those days. But there's a benefit to standing back from that and helping to build skills. That could be meditation, counting to 10, taking a deep breath or 2 or 3, stretching, focusing on something. For some, just looking at a picture of something that's calming or enjoyable, thinking about what might be happening next in the day that would be more positive. Being able to regulate emotions is extremely difficult for many people with ADHD and executive dysfunction. Learning how to do that is very important, because when you think about students who are unable to manage their emotions or shift their behavior in front of their peers, it makes it very difficult for them to be socially accepted. So that's what we're working on, trying to help them understand how to shift so that what ends up happening is that there is a sense of self, a sense of I can control, I can regulate. Another piece which is fabulous if you have not seen it is the Cookie Monster video, which is also on the JST site, and it's called Me Wait. And it's great for young people as well as adults. I show it at many of our trainings, and the coaches love it, and they can really relate to the simplicity of being able to wait for that next cookie. So that's what we're working on. Okay, so the next piece is self-awareness. Thinking about what it is that you are doing. What is the student doing or not doing that is creating a possible social issue? And first thing is inappropriate versus appropriate behavior. It goes back a bit to the self-regulation, but part of it is that in order to self-regulate, you have to be aware of what you're doing, because how can you stop doing something you don't know you're doing? So self-awareness is a key to building a more socially appropriate way of being and a more comfortable way of being for all of us. We all learn from our mistakes, but it's also important to learn by modeling from others. Oftentimes, students who have ADHD and executive dysfunction are not noticing the details in what's going on around them. It's one of the problems when there's inattentiveness. So there might be social cues that are not being picked up by that particular student. So that's why we want to talk about self-awareness with them, look at what might be appropriate or inappropriate in a situation, role play, discuss, brainstorm, whatever it takes to help them. So as far as inappropriate behavior, interrupting or blurting. Now, often the blurting is noticed, but stopping that blurting can take time, so it takes a little bit of practice of what could you do instead of blurting it out, writing something down, making some kind of a note, using a fidget toy that might just redirect the energy. Interrupting, I hear from a lot of students that their tendency to interrupt is not as much about blurting out as it is, I'm afraid I can't or won't remember what I wanted to say if I don't say it right now, so I have to interrupt to get my thoughts out. That makes a lot of sense, except in social situations or in a classroom setting, it's not appropriate to interrupt in the middle when someone else is speaking. You can get in trouble when you interrupt a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, a coach, meaning an athletic coach, someone who's talking or giving information out and wants you to listen. So helping, similar to the blurting, writing it down, pausing, having some kind of signal if you're working with someone that you know. Oftentimes it's helpful to have the student put up their finger or their hand saying, could you just wait a minute, I need to say something. So they're interrupting in a way that is more appropriate than just blurting it out. Yelling and pushing, that happens oftentimes pre-adolescent and then during adolescence, middle school, and sometimes high school, that when students aren't aware that their reaction to someone else is inappropriate, that I've had some students who don't even realize that they've raised their voice, or they tap somebody on the shoulder and don't realize that their tap was actually a push. So it's important to get feedback to help students understand what to ask of other people. What is it that I did that upset you? That's a really great question to ask someone if you're not self-aware. And then we work on it from there. Boundaries in personal space, that's another one. If you ever been with someone who literally gets in your face, we hear that sort of jokingly, or you see it in the movies where someone's really up in someone's face to intimidate. But oftentimes students with low self-awareness, poor self-awareness, don't know that boundary. So we have to set it up. We have to work on, okay, what's the appropriate space in between? Or explain to them or demonstrate for them, what would it be like if I was this close to your face? Put a piece of paper up, your hand, you could demonstrate it. Parents can do this too, just to help them realize that there is a certain amount of space that each of us needs. And that happens in the workplace. I remember years ago working with someone who had no sense of boundary. And she would talk to you and almost touch your nose. It just felt overwhelming. So that's something we want to teach these students. Asking versus telling. If you want something, ask for it rather than demanding. That's a big one that can actually be shifted fairly easily so that we can change to a more, if you want to use the word polite, more appropriate, respectful way of getting what one needs. Something that happens as time goes on, especially for teenagers and young adults, is the impulsivity and the risk-taking. If they can't self-regulate and they're acting before they're thinking, the opposite of what we really want to have happen, there's a chance of, oh, well, it's no big deal if I take this off the shelf. Nobody's going to see. And then they get caught for stealing. Or trying something new and different that's dangerous, whether that's taking a drink, trying drugs, running out of the house or staying out too late, saying, well, no one will notice, I'll sneak back in. Impulsively buying something, even if you have the money, and realizing it was an impulse buy. That happens often, and you notice that sometimes students have difficulty saving their money because they had a moment of impulsivity and went and bought a bunch of candy or a DVD or a new game, spent the money on something but didn't really think about it, and later it's like, wow, I just spent my last $10 on junk food. So that's something to be aware of and to help them with, because it isn't always an intentional move, especially when there's lack of self-awareness. This is an unintentional, just kind of got to have it in the moment. And that's a tough one. It really is. So I encourage you, regardless of your role, to work on that and to help young people, especially from 12 on up, and even actually a little younger when it comes to drugs and alcohol, how addictive those can be, especially to someone who doesn't have impulse control and has a brain that is wired to want more, more, more. And that's where a lot of students get into trouble, and where the earlier we can start with coaching can make a big difference. So when we talk about age and youth, immaturity, what's age-appropriate behavior? I had a student once, and she was delightful, but in comparison to her peers, she acted like a baby. So they all liked her because she was sweet, but they treated her like a much younger child. So imagine fifth graders, so we're talking about 11 years old, most of them. And in some schools, by the time you go to 6th grade, you're in middle school. Others, you have one more year of elementary school. So it's important to get some of those skills in place and to be in a state of mind where it's age appropriate. So if at age 11, um, the student was continuing to need to hold somebody's hand to go somewhere, hugging everyone, talking baby talk, doing things that really were not appropriate at that 5th or 6th grade level. That's where the immaturity comes in, and you'll often find that students will spend time with younger kids. And if they don't, and they spend time with peers, they'll spend time with peers who are accepting them for being different, but that isn't always a good acceptance. It could be, well, you can hang out with us, but we want you to do this for us or that for us. So that's more of the kids think that they are being picked out because they're special and they're getting attention from older students, but sometimes it's, well, do our homework for us, carry our books for us. It's more actually a bullying type of environment. So it's important to work on understanding immaturity and helping students to be aware of the fact that, you know what, you're just not ready to go on a date yet. You're not ready to independently make certain choices, and maybe they're not ready to start driving a car or to be able to decide the difference between right and wrong in certain scenarios, so you don't necessarily want to send your child out on his or her own. But the other piece of it too is that often it's very difficult and very lonely, because with that immaturity comes a problem making friends, because others don't necessarily want to be with you if you are not acting age appropriate. And we can't push maturity. I mean, it's not possible to flip a switch and say, okay, executive functions, let's get going here, increase, improve, change, and let's mature. So it's important to explain, whether it's your child or the student that you're coaching or teaching, that you help them understand that whatever they like to do in terms of their interests, their hobbies, that those are certainly fine, but maybe let's dabble a little bit in some things that the other kids your age are doing, and help to bridge that gap, because it is a transition between child's play and more mature adolescent, post-adolescent play. The next piece that is really important for us to work on and to build is self-confidence. The sheer problem of low self-esteem and low self-confidence for individuals with ADHD, and this is all age ranges, it has a huge impact, negative impact, if the self-esteem is low. So what we're looking at is trying to find ways to support students so that they can become more self-confident, self-determined adults and move out into the world feeling good about the choices that they make, the people that they're with, feeling good about themselves, because that confidence oftentimes is really beat down by the negativity that can come from parents, teachers, siblings, friends, not intentionally all the time, but if it's always about what a student didn't do correctly versus praising them for what they did do and helping them feel good about their accomplishments, even if those accomplishments aren't what the adults might expect or want, it's still an accomplishment. That's why I really believe in praising for effort and helping students to see that they can become confident adults if they just learn how to pick themselves up, the resiliency piece, be aware of what they're doing and what they're not doing in an appropriate manner so that they're socially more connected, and also finding ways to be more resilient. You know, what will it take for you to bounce back from this? What might help you with that? Who might help you with that? So when we look specifically at this piece of self-confidence, one of the strategies that can be really helpful is using strengths. We had a webinar a few weeks ago on using strengths in coaching. And it's something where if you want that, let me know and I'll get a copy of it for you. But the whole idea behind it is we can do strengths inventories, find out what the student does really well. What do you love to do? I ask those questions all the time. What's your favorite subject? Not just because you'll do well in it, but what do you enjoy about it? What is it about English that you like? Well, I enjoy writing or reading the stories that other people write. And it's fascinating to learn about what happens in different time periods, or I like fantasy and being in another world and another dimension. All of those things that can be validated and valued can build self-confidence, because there's always someone else in the world who will feel the same way about that. But it takes time to build the confidence in a student so he can go out and ask, who else likes this type of this genre, or would you want to go see a movie, whether that's a Lord of the Rings or a Star Wars, something that's exciting and interesting and fascinating. Most of the students that we work with in coaching are absolutely brilliant. They are gifted, talented young people who don't have the confidence to go out and share what they know because they feel as though they'll be laughed at. So there's that lack of support around what they want to do. So it's important, again, to give them strategies, to brainstorm on what might help them feel better about themselves. And when they start to experience success, that's when it kicks in. That's that behavior shift. Because by experiencing success, it's repeated. It felt good. I was successful. Now I have the courage to try it again. I have the confidence to try it again. Improving positive self-image. What would help with that? If it's your child, have them look in the mirror. What would you like? What do you see when you look in the mirror? What do you like about yourself? You might share what you notice about them or what you know about them. Oftentimes, I'll be meeting with students and they'll share something that they enjoy doing, or they might come in with their favorite sports team, and we'll talk about sports, and they know more about these sports than I do, and that's a confidence builder. And it's not fake. It truly is something that I'm interested in whether that's sports or music, or film or exercise, some kind of athletic activity, anything that the students want to talk about. They need an opportunity to go out and try it and feel good about it, and to know that they can do it again and again and again. It's like the story I mentioned about the student with theater. We want to help students to be involved in things that they enjoy, but maybe they don't have the self-confidence or the skill at the beginning to jump right in, but being behind the scenes could still give them a piece of the action, and that's an important thing. So we continue to work on them and work with them to improve their self-image, to have self-directed praise, which is really important. So I want to give you a couple of examples of the self-directed praise. Typically, what we as adults might say to a student is, "I'm very proud of you," or "Wow, I'm impressed by what you did." Instead of saying that, say, "Wow, I see that you got a good grade on this," or "You got an A on this test. How does that feel for you? What's it like to have accomplished this? What's it like to have asked someone out for a date?" It's not about me being proud of that student. It's about asking them how they feel about themselves, and to offer opportunities to pat themselves on the back. Rewards that are chosen by the students, not by the coach, the parents, the teachers, something that would feel really good for them to do, to have, not necessarily monetarily, but just an activity or an opportunity to do something that they enjoy, that they're really good at, and continue to learn how to praise themselves, to be proud of the work they do, to be proud of the steps that they take moving forward. It takes courage. And that's often courageousness, bravery, and knowledge, understanding. Those are a lot of the words that when we use those in noticing how our students are being, it helps them to come up with some self-directed praise. So if I'm talking about the bravery or the courage that I'm noticing that my student, my coaching student has or had to go and talk with a teacher or to ask someone to go to a movie or to come over and hang out, whatever that might be, that could be huge. So I want to acknowledge that, and in that acknowledgement, allow that kind of puffed up peacock strut and self-directed praise in order for the student to feel good about, yeah, I did do that. I did that, and I've never done that before. Wow, way to go. And that's what's so important, because we're constantly looking at how to shift from praising from our point of view to self-directed praise, where students really start to own it and feel it. And that makes a huge difference. So, what can you do to help? Regardless of your role, be curious, ask questions. Open-ended questions with non-judgmental conversations. So examples of that. What would you be willing to tell me about what happened? What could you do differently? Imagine that you were the other person. How could that help with a role play? So imagine that you were the person who was pushed. How would that feel for you? What would that look like for you? And how would you like a friend to treat you? In turn, when you're in that role, how would you treat someone else who you want to have as your friend? And when things happen and we are non-judgmental in our conversations, in our words, in our questions, and we're just more curious about what's happening, it makes it much easier for students to be honest and tell us what's happened, because it's embarrassing to say that I made a mistake, or yes, I did hit someone or punch someone, or I called them a name of sorts, or I forgot that I was supposed to meet the guys at the corner and we were going to go to, so-and-so's mom was going to drive us and we were going to go to the movies. Completely forgot. Okay, we can work on that. That's a skill around time management and memory that can be worked on, but socially, that person just took a real hit because it was embarrassing not to remember to show up. So we put all those pieces together, which is why it's so important when it comes to working on building executive functioning skills across the board. Makes a big, big difference for so many of these students. So the one piece that I do want to share, and I could have listed lots of different strategies, and again, I encourage you to reach out to me if there's a question you have, or you can post. I have plenty of time for a Q&A here. You can always post questions as I'm talking now, or as soon as I'm done. Just post them and I will we'll take a look at them. I see that there are a few here, so I will get to those in just a moment. So as far as strategies, play dates. Now, play date sounds like a preschool kind of thing, but really think of play dates as an opportunity to connect two students, two kids together, regardless of their age. Focused activities, rather than just hanging out, what could they do together? Whether that's going to a game, playing a game, going to a movie, watching something, doing an activity together. One of the great things about robotics, if you're familiar with robotics, is a lot of the students that I've worked with over time are involved in some type of robotics or computer work that allows them to focus in on that activity while being with others. And it's really helped. In the same way with theater, they're focused on the play, on their lines, on working together. So the focus is not on the individual, it's on the group. Encourage next steps without hovering. Let whatever's going to happen, happen. And you'll be there. And let the students know, I'll be there to support you, but this is something you're going to go out and try yourself. Offer ideas and enlist your child's buy-in. What are some alternatives? What are some of the things that you could do with your friends? Or what might you say when you call up and ask somebody to come over? Working with a coach, a behavior therapist, or a counselor, depending on the age of the student, sometimes it isn't coaching. For younger kids, say younger than 8, or even if they're from 8 to 10 and they're really not mature enough to manage the coaching, behavior therapists and counselors who work with kids are phenomenal. So I'd really recommend that. Let me take a look at some of the questions here. Okay. What about when they overthink and don't take risks at all? Yes, that great question, Connie. There's that anxiety that is a part of so much of this, that, well, if I do this and I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, so I'm going to think about it some more and maybe come up with another way, but then I'm not going to do it, and they go back and forth. A lot of that is that what's called rumination. And when rumination occurs, everything is bouncing around in that person's head, and they're really mulling it over and over and over, to the point that we on the outside think, my gosh, what's happening? Why is my child or the student not moving forward and taking a chance? Well, inside, it's excruciating for them. And I learned that with some students, and what we had to do is to break down whatever it is that they were going to do into much, much smaller steps. So instead of overthinking it, offering an opportunity to say, okay, so what are all the parts of this thing that you're thinking about? And if there's a way to break them down into smaller steps and think about how each little step can move you forward, that can be a lot easier. But if it looks as if taking the step and thinking about something that they're going to do, taking that risk, is too large and too scary, it means it's too big. Because often it comes across as this wave of overwhelm with the rumination of what if I do, what if I don't, and it goes back and forth. That's one of the difficulties for people who have an overactive brain, because it never stops. It's the reason sleep issues happen too, trying to calm the brain down. So one of the ways to help with that risk-taking, in a way, phobia or fear of taking risks, is to talk about what those risks might be, but also look at what size chunk are you willing to try. And it's amazing how when we chunk it down so small that you might think this is ridiculously small, it really isn't. It's allowing for that structure to be piece by piece, step by step, and that makes a big difference. Are there other questions that are coming up from the group? Okay. So one of the other things that I wanted to mention, and before I share with you, I'm just going to put the slide up here about our training programs that start actually next week, and then we have a couple. Oh, you're welcome. We have a couple coming up on weekend courses here in Northern Virginia, and it's cold right now, but it's supposed to warm up in a couple of weeks. So for anyone looking at this, I hope that there's still a couple of spaces to join us. But one of the things that's important about this social impact is that because executive functioning delays or deficits are hidden, oftentimes the extended family doesn't understand why your child, why your kid, student, what have you, and even teachers don't understand why they're acting inappropriately. Like, why can't you just grow up? What's it going to take for you to change? Well, those types of comments are really, really hurtful, and they're also counterproductive, because this is about what is it that's holding you back, and that chunking down, helping them to understand in a kind way, providing observation, being curious, as I mentioned before, because if we want to build resiliency, self-regulation, self-awareness, and that self-confidence, which is hugely important to move forward and be okay in life. In order to build those, we need to watch our words. We need to be really careful to look at this as something that is brand new. So it doesn't matter if the student is 10 or 20 or anywhere in between or even 30 or 50. For some people, learning social skills and understanding the impact of their behavior on their lives socially, and socially doesn't just mean partying, it's like social interaction in the cafeteria. I've had students who wouldn't eat with other students because of fear of not saying the right thing and taking all the food back to the dorm. So we want to look at this as something that's new and different and very uncomfortable for a lot of students and take it slow. So there's another question here. How do you work with, how do you work with the social impacts of executive functioning within a marriage when one partner has ADHD? That is a great question. And one of my trainers or colleagues, Kimber Nelson, is actually doing some work with that. And she is what I would recommend, and I do work with some adults, that first of all, there are some great books out there. It's very helpful when you are the non-ADHD spouse or partner, to make sure that it's understood that these are just differences between the two of you, that it's not about better or worse, because that's when the defensiveness comes up. So to be able to manage the social impact of executive functioning on a marriage, it's important to sit down and have if possible, have a conversation, just the two of you. And if that's not possible, then the best way to deal with that is to find a counselor who will work with you, or a coach if it's not serious in terms of the emotional impact, to be able to help be that observer, that third party, to work on the different issues. If you're not familiar with it, Melissa Orlov does a lot on relationships, and she is at the Hallowell Center and has written some books. Basically, what we're looking for is finding new ways to openly communicate between partners. And that can be very difficult when the defenses have gone up. So think about where you are in your marriage, what the sort of the temperature is. Is this something that's heated, or are you in a position now where you can say, it might be helpful if we took a look at some of the strategies that we can use in terms of asking each other what we want. Asking for what you want can be really difficult in a relationship, so being able to do that. Finding out the different learning styles. So I'm just going to, again, write these down. So we look at learning styles and what a person wants, the wants and needs. So for example, if you have a partner who needs to better understand the people that you might be going to visit with, it can be helpful to do a little bit of background and explain, we're going here, we're going to be doing this. Oftentimes, some adults are just not comfortable. So it's nice to be able to find out what it is that your partner needs in order to feel more comfortable socially. Often adults who interrupt a lot don't really have those boundaries. That's something where it's helpful for another person to work with them and either do group couples coaching or counseling, or if you're able to have your partner with ADHD go for coaching to start with, to learn some of those skills, because that may impact them in the workplace. So if it's impacting in other areas of life, then that's a great opportunity to do some coaching. Any other questions? I'm just going to take a look here. Yeah, thank you for sharing that about being in denial. And that's where it really comes down to, it may not be, it doesn't even have to be about ADHD or executive functioning. It's just we are having communication problems. Let's manage our communication problems with the therapist in order to move forward. As a non-ADHD partner, you could benefit from some of the books that are out there. And as I said, one of the coaches that is great with this is Kimber Nelson. And if you want her information, just get in touch with me and I will put that out there. Great. Well, I think at this point, the only other thing that I want to share with you, other than the courses that are coming up, is if there's anything that I can do or any of the coaches that work with us can help you with, whether it's finding a coach or finding training, supporting you around what's going on, because we're connected to so many different organizations, please reach out. And I look forward to staying in touch with you. And we will send out a recording. If not today, by tomorrow, you'll have a recording of this so you can listen to it again. And thank you so much for being here.